on this episode of Postcards.
People that want to travel that far really do have a yearning to experience this.
One of the best things about being an artist is having an outlet.
I tell people I just had a hobby. I can't quit my job and take up my hobby because I started that in the beginning.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. Live Wide Open, a regional movement that encourages people to make a great life for themselves in west central Minnesota. More at livewideopen.com. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com.
Norwegian knives are not instruments of trying to hurt anyone. These are very functional for whittling wood and, like we would use a pocket knife for cutting rope, opening your mail, whatever. It's totally different than an American knife because it has no hilt. That has a disadvantage is you have to be careful not to cut yourself. If you're, doing something strenuous like field dressing a deer or something, you have to be careful. I usually put my finger behind the back butt here, and so you don't hurt yourself if you're cutting, because they are extremely sharp. I've been making knives for over 30 years about now. I don't make a tremendous amount of knives, maybe 8 a year or so. And I do serial number my knives so I know exactly how many I've made, 206. In teaching, I've had over 500 knife making students and they've all produced a knife. So that adds up to quite a few knives that are floating around in western Minnesota here.
Well, Gene Tokheim is my mentor, and I learned a lot from him. Gene and his family had come back from Norway. Gene had learned this over in Europe, and he thought he'd try doing some teaching. My son and Gene Tokheim's son were the same age. They were lifelong friends. And my son made a knife when he was quite young with his friend Luke. And then in '98, I took a class that Gene was putting on in Milan, and I got hooked right away.
John is a natural. I have had maybe a handful of students that could see it and pick up that knife and automatically they could do it. And John was one of them, and now of course he's a great teacher too. So
I like teaching. I like being around different people. I think I can get the lesson across pretty well, although I always worry about it. I don't think I'd want to be a teacher for a living. I just enjoy being around people and showing them this. It's an easy class to to fall back on. We know we're going to have good participation generally. There's always a sprinkling of locals and people from far away. In this last class, we had people from Nebraska, Montana, Twin Cities, Hibbing. People will travel a great distance to stay here for several days to take a class like this. And yeah, you know, people that want to travel that far really do have a yearning to experience this. Well, the Milan Village Art School, it's a folk art school. Basis was in offering Scandinavian type arts. We've been here for over 25 years. It keeps growing every year. We will almost have more students wanting to take the class than we'll have space for. We've offered a satellite school. You know, Milan being the main campus, St. Paul is our satellite town. Working with our hands, I think perhaps interests people. The biggest challenge for a beginner is removing enough wood on a handle. And if a person removes the wood to the level he's comfortable with and he doesn't want to go any further, I'll tell him, well, then work with hand tools. There are a lot of people that have never been around a bandsaw or a power sander, and you have to ask that question of the class. Are you familiar with this? Are you comfortable with this? When I had industrial arts growing up, we did a lot of different things in there than what kids do today. And then growing up on a farm, you were expected to do a lot of things that a lot of other parts of our society don't get an opportunity to do. Maybe people take the class to experience this, even ever so briefly.
You train the student to use their eye to design their knife. They don't all have to be the same. So there's some creativity involved, and some of the young students I've had are extremely creative in the things they come up with. And usually if I figure they can handle it, I let them run with it and do a little bit different things than is your traditional Norwegian knife. So. And I love the three different types of materials. You know, you're working with wood, you know, birch, and you're working with silver and also leather.
Well, the knives that the students make in these classes are basically made up of three parts. That's a handle, the blade, and the sheath. The wood that we work with generally is birch, Scandinavian birch. The blades that we work with are laminated Scandinavian blades, which means there's 3 layers of steel, 2 mild layers sandwiching a hard steel. That's the core of the blade that gives its sharpness and hardness. The leathers that we work with are European leathers. They're tanned a little differently than American style. We use an Italian leather that keeps its shape over time. And I use a German half-tan leather. Both leathers make a sheath that is strong enough and safe enough that it does not need a liner. The style of the knife is such that the knife stays in the sheath without any mechanical fastening. It's held in place by friction. It'll click into place, yet you can pull it out with one hand, yet it stays in the sheath very easily. People are always very happy with their project when they're done. At the end of the class, the class lays their knives out on a nice sheepskin and they're photographed, and they always look very nice. It's even if they aren't 100% perfect, They're a great feeling of satisfaction.
The students that took my class last week, they're going to take those 10 knives home and show them to all their friends and relatives, and they're going to say, wow, you made that? You know, and a lot of people wonder, nah, you didn't make that. Because it's really hard to figure out how that could possibly be done if you just look at it. And those silver pieces they're made for you, aren't they? No, you have to make those. The Tokheim ancestry is from the Bergen area in Norway, and the family farm is still there. And the third cousins are still running the farm. So that is why I wanted to pass that tradition along.
It's hard to look over the horizon to see where this is going. I don't want to believe that this is this rebirth or this interest has a bubble and then it collapses. As long as we have somebody that's willing to teach it, I think there's always going to be somebody willing to study it.
When I took my first ceramic course in 1968, I loved that too, and I was captivated, and doing that some 50 years later. So in the knife making, after I took that course, I was captivated by that, and was also very much part of my heritage. Wanted to pass that on to others, and I don't know, I just, because I loved it so much, I figured other people would too.
I studied art as a child when I was 5, 6 years old, so I enjoyed drawing mostly in pencil. Then I started doing African crafts as well. When I got to high school, I did more painting and drawing. I ventured into acrylics and oils. So then I got to college and I majored in studio art. So that's where I explored some pottery, painting again, and sculpture. Growing up in Uganda was a little bit different. I grew up in the capital city, Kampala, actually. So at the time that I grew up, it wasn't as developed as it is right now. We didn't have the mega stores and all the tourists at the time. My family was from the Baganda tribe, which is the majority tribe and also the central tribe in Kampala. I had a balance of the Western culture, flying to England on holidays, but also being taught my tribal language and culture. A lot of my work marries the different cultures that I've lived in, starting from birth, my Ugandan culture, and then I mix it up with my American life, because I've been in America for 20 years. Right now I focus mostly on acrylic paintings. I teach classes, I teach drawing, oil painting, and acrylic painting. But when I'm doing my own work, I focus mostly on acrylic because it's an easier medium to work with. And most of the work that I do as well is mixed media. And I tend to use found objects as well. So my work would be on cardboard or a piece of plywood that I found. So it's never one medium usually. One of the best things about being an artist is having an outlet. When I start a piece, sometimes it starts out realistic and becomes more abstract. It depends on what the experience was with where I was going and what the message I was trying to communicate. One of my bigger pieces is called Self-Imprisonment. So it was a time where I felt that I was stuck and I didn't know how to get out of that prison mentally. So the way I got out of that prison is I spent days and days in my studio painting. I let out whatever it is that I needed to let out. And as I did let it out and participate in shows, it helped me talk about those issues, talk about the things that I needed to talk about to get out of that prison. In painting my works and having to share them, that helped me a lot to get rid of the imprisonment that I had put myself in. About 3 years ago, I went through one of the most horrible experiences in my life. I was suffering from fibroids and was consistently in hospital, needing blood transfusions because of the heavy bleeding. So it seemed like this little perfect life of mine had come undone. So that's how I started that painting, Undone. And I painted it specifically on the cardboard box because I had this box and I opened it up and just started painting, and I included the uterus because that's where everything began, that's where all the problems began. But after I got sick, somehow my life snowballed into getting involved with the community, because then I started doing my art more, and as I displayed it, it brought conversation, and it just led me to where I am today at the Culture Center, because when I started exhibiting my art, the center heard about me and they needed an artist in residence, so I was selected for that. As I displayed my work, I got to meet more people. I got more passionate about being involved in the community and promoting the arts. Coming from a different country sometimes is difficult, especially if if you were born in one country and then lived in other countries, throughout your life, because at times you don't feel a sense of belonging. Because even when you go back to the country that you were born in, they don't see you as being from there. And then when you are in a foreign country, you're still a foreigner. So that can be difficult in that sense, where you sort of have an identity crisis at some point, and it's something that you have to work through, and that I had to work through to figure out, where do I really belong? My heritage piece depicts my background in Uganda as well as my life in America. It includes the Ugandan flag, which is red, yellow, and black, and then the American flag, which is red, white, and blue. And the thing that's in common there is the red, which in a sense symbolizes we all bleed the same. And in marrying those two cultures, for me, it just shows that I am the same person. I am the same person in Uganda, I am the same person in America.
I started it within about a year after I got out of high school, which is quite a while back. And my interest was in doing taxidermy work, and I did that full-time for probably 30 years. Then it started to switch to more of a historical thing, including the black powder scene and native culture and native history, 1800 history. It's grown into what it is today. My brother and I wanted to mount our own pheasant when we shot a pheasant. So we took a correspondence course on taxidermy, and that's how I got started in it. It started just with an interest from hunting. The typical response we get from somebody who has never seen it, they can't believe it when they walk in, because they say, I've never seen anything like this. It's a very unique business because we've catered to taxidermy in the beginning, and then we've catered to people who are interior decorating, and we've catered to the movie industry in different ways. So it's been really diversified, and it's kind of settling into that 1800 thing, which there's a lot of interest in that today. Well, the things that we sell in the store are again, a kind of a collection of things that go from one interest to another interest to another interest. Today, the items that are of the most interest are the items that are used in the native culture. And you get to some of the brain tanned leather, which is a very popular thing. It's the leather that would have been used in the early days, and it's still being used in the quill working and the beadwork. And that's a product that we have been able and fortunate enough to be able to access for the native people. But it's a real Duke's mixture, you might say. Most of what we're doing with the native people has to do with their culture and with their desire to keep that alive. And a lot of the products that we have are used in fostering the desire to keep that alive. We get to meet a lot of these people over the years. We've got to get to know these people, and we get to know their life today and where they're at today and where they were. I guess I feel very privileged to be able to be a part of this, because the native people seem to really realize that we're respecting their culture and their way of life. And I think that's really been gratifying. Leather is a very big item with us. All the leather, the rawhide, all of the products that you see are pretty much done on a commercial basis. But no, we don't do any processing here other than the initial preparation of maybe raw skins to forward them to the commercial tanneries. And that's pretty much the nature of this type of business. The movie, Dances with Wolves, it came about simply by the movie industry seeing a catalog that we had, or probably by one individual that knew us and recommended us. We were contacted by the costume designer of the film. We worked with her to get the type of leather that they were looking for. And they were looking primarily for the leather itself, deer leather, for the costumes. So it was very interesting because we monitored it real closely, because they purchased upwards in the neighborhood of 1,000 deer skins for the costumes of that movie. And we didn't want to sell them 200 big skins and then they cut them up and made little kids' breech clouts. So we monitored that real closely, because the items were made, I think, in at least 3 different locations in the United States, the costumes. I think the most exciting thing of it is how does somebody in a little podunk town like this get that happen? You know, and I've had this happen with a couple different movies, and I won't say which ones, but you know, that's kind of the interesting thing to me, that could happen. But it simply happened because our name was out there with people that were doing things like this and working with things like this, and lo and behold, it fell into place. What keeps me going? I tell people I just had a hobby. I can't quit my job and take up my hobby because I started that in the beginning. So it's kind of it's a love for what you were doing. And be it taxidermy or be it what we're doing today, this is a little bit more refreshing. You get to meet people and you get to, you know, contact with people in their daily lives rather than the guy bringing a deer head and you don't see him for a year. I guess in the future of this, I'd be very, very pleased. We have two sons that work with us here now, and they're both very interested in it. And I think that I'd like to see it continue, which any parent would. I had a good friend that was very interested in this kind of things, and he always told me that he would talk to people a lot about this place. And he would always tell them, he says, you can imagine whatever you want to. He says, and when you get there, it'll be more than that. It is so off the wall and so much to see basically in a little spot. And there's a lot of useful items that you didn't know you needed.
Visit pioneer.org/postcards to catch up on missed episodes and to find out more about your favorite segments. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. Live Wide Open, a regional movement that encourages people to make a great life for themselves in west central Minnesota. More at livewideopen.com. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com.